It is Leslie here from Essentially Active, and I'm going to give a go doing a race report as a video log instead of doing the whole blogging thing, and see how this works. Because I've got so many thoughts about Ultra Trail Kosciuszko 2024. So I did the 100-kilometre version, and it was my third year in a row doing this race over the 100K version. And we've had 3 different courses and 3 completely different adventures. And this race report is about this year's adventure, which is super cool. So for those of you that may not know where Kosciuszko is, or Kosciuszko, if you want to pronounce it a little bit more Polish, it is in the Australian Alps, and Kosci is the highest point in Australia. It's about 2,200 metres. So compared to some other mountains in the world, it's not necessarily as high, but for us down under, it's a big thing because we're going to the top of our world. And it is an alpine environment which a lot of trail runners may not necessarily run in very regularly. And it's pretty cool because I've got a personal connection with the land, because ever since I was a little girl, probably before I can remember, my parents and I would go on our summer holidays, and I learned to fish there. We would go hiking to different fishing spots along the Threadneedle River. And so my memories and my connection to this land is pretty strong. I go back, and the aroma, the bush, which is quite unique in the alpine environment here in Australia, it just brings me right back, and I feel like I'm coming home every single time. This is part of the reason why I can't not do this race. And the very first year this race was on offer, only the 100K and a mile I went to the summit. And so this is what I kind of said, well, got to do the 100K. I haven't yet done a mile. That's on the cards. We'll talk about that later. So I just keep going back, and I keep going back to this adventure, and it's so super cool. Anywho, this year we started at Perisher and went on some really super cool new trails. So we started at about 7 in the morning, and the awesome thing was I had my hubby Kilner drive up. He was going to be crew for the day, and he was my crew for the day. And so we got there nice and early. We were able to just chill, catch up with people that we knew, just feel the vibe of the day. And then just after 7, we started. The announcer said there were roughly 950 starters for this race. And then off we went. There was a loop around Perisher. Then we entered a whole heap of new trail that went from Perisher to Charlotte's Pass. For those that did the first year a couple of years ago, we ran to Charlotte's Pass by the road, but there's this awesome single trail that goes from Perisher to Charlotte's Pass, and so that's what we used, and that's the first 16K of the race. It was awesome to catch up with different people that you knew along the way, and you have chats with people. I tend to run my ultras on my own, so to speak. It doesn't mean you don't have connection along the way. And so in this first section, there were some people I knew that I chatted with. There were some new people I chatted with. It was all single trail. Some of it had some granite slabs as kind of stones along the pathway. It got quite slippery. And there was also quite a fair bit of cheese grater. Now, for those that don't know the cheese grater, it is a metal walkway designed to protect the alpine environment, the ground, the plants and everything around, because it's highly susceptible to erosion. On top of that, it is metal and it is serrated because we're above the snow line. So the idea is that if it was smooth, when it got icy, you'd be slipping all over the place. So it's designed to have a little bit of grip. But when you start to run on these metal cheese graters, especially in trail shoes, you can catch and you end up with a bit of a fall. And the people are the cheese. This is why we call it the cheese grater. So the idea is it's not really recommended that you run. My choice is that I choose not to run on the cheese graters at all. And so this section, I had this whole race plan in place. My training block had gone really well. What I didn't realise about this section, what I probably couldn't have known because it's only just opened, is that there were a lot more sections of cheese grater, which meant there were more sections to walk than I had planned. So I got into Charlotte Pass Village checkpoint probably 20 to 30 minutes behind my plan. But my awesome hubby was there. We got in and out of the checkpoint pretty quickly. The sun wasn't necessarily shining, but it was a warm day. It was super humid. I was sweating a fair bit. I drank a decent amount of water on this section, but not everything. It didn't really sink in at this point. But again, touch on that as we go. So after that, off we went towards the summit, and that's the summit of Kosciuszko. So this was relatively uneventful. It is just this constant climb, nothing crazy gradient-wise. Again, having some lovely chats along the way. And then we start to see some storm clouds coming as we sort of get to the base of this little spiral that gets you to Rawson's Pass. And we're almost at the top of Rawson's Pass and we start to hear thunder. All of a sudden, bam, hail just emerges and we have the marshal that was at the summit come back down and say, hey, race is suspended, go back down. We're like, what do we do? Basically, we turn around to come back down and I record some footage of hail. We try and get our wet weather gear on, at least a jacket. And this hail is just hitting, it's stinging. I have a few little bruises on my legs and so forth because the hail really hurt. A couple of us at different points tried to get some shelter from hail under some rocks, just mainly because it was just so intense, hail hitting the skin. And so I took a moment to sort of readjust my wet weather jacket. I hadn't put my pants on at that point, but just to readjust the jacket tightly and then venture down. It got to a point where we were going like one way or the other. So we'd come from a certain direction of Charlotte's Pass and had to go around the other way. We decided to carry on because we were given the choice by the marshal. So we just carried on and I started to really shiver. So I paused, got out my wet weather gear, sort of put the wet weather pants on and so forth. And just kept pushing through. By this point, there was so much water on the trail that it turned to mud. I went to put my foot down on a section that I thought was like hail on top of trail. It turned into a massive deep puddle. And so everything felt soaked at this point. It was super windy, it was super cold, but you kind of knew that you could not stop. You just had to keep going. And so that's what I did. I kept moving back towards Charlotte's Pass Lookout. Now, as I came back towards Charlotte's Pass Lookout, you can kind of see where people were coming back down toward me and then off towards the next checkpoint at Guthiga. And there were so many people running all at once, which would be a little bit unusual at this point in the race, because when we were coming back to the Charlotte's Pass Lookout, that was going to be the 40k mark of the race. And so normally people are a lot more spread out. So I get down, I do the river crossing there and head up, and there's some marshals, and I'm super confused what's going on. So it turns out a bunch of runners were held Charles Park's lookout for a couple of hours because all of the aid stations were paused. But because when the storm hit, I was in the middle of different places, we just sort of kept moving. It was the safest thing to do based on where we were. But turns out that, a bunch of people that didn't get to where the rules passed had a shorter version of the race to do. Safety first. So the race directors and the staff and the volunteers and everyone was super awesome. In some respects, I was super lucky because I got to do pretty much the traditional planned course. And so we just kept going. And so what do you do in this moment? Like, you don't know what's going to happen to your time. You don't know how things are going to go, and that's okay. What you do is that you do know that you need to get to the finish line. And so what you do is you go up to the checkpoint, you touch base with your crew who were there, you regroup, refuel, and on you go. And so that's what I did. I knew this section between Charlottes Pass Lookout and Guthagar pretty well because this was the third time I was going to do it. I knew there were lots of cheese graters, but I knew it's about, okay, run when it's safe, walk when it's not. And so I did that and I was feeling really good. One thing that I think helped a lot at this point, it's like, okay, it doesn't matter what's happened before this point in the race. Let's just focus on this next split to the next aid station and do the best, because based on my plan, I can actually get to the next point pretty good. I don't have to worry about how I was slower beforehand. I just focus on that next chunk. And so that's what I did. And I did a really good time. So I did my fastest time of the 3 years between that next checkpoint, which was between Charlottes Pass Lookout and Guthagar Base Camp. Got into Guthagar Base Camp. It was a no crew checkpoint for me. Had a cup of coffee, put wet weather gear on again because it looked a bit sus, and then headed out, which was cool. Now, I'm starting to feel really hot and humid and bothered. So I pulled off the wet pants but left the rain jacket on and then kept walking towards Perisher. Now, this section of trail was similar to sections of the last couple of years where mentally I had struggled. So I worked with my coach to say, hey, put on some music, really focus on moving through this section, because there's nothing in the section to stop you moving quite well. It's a little bit undulating. There's no crazy climbs. It's not technical at all. So it should be a section I could maximise. And so that's what I focused on doing, and I kept going, and I executed this section really well. What, however, happened in this section is the heavens opened. There was so much rain. The volume of water, crazy. And so everyone got absolutely drenched. So I walk into the Perisher checkpoint and I was just a drowned rat. The super cool thing was that in addition to Kilna waiting for me there, I saw Pablo, who I'd met over in Chamonix last year, and he's like, Leslie, get your dry clothes on, get your wet clothes off, change, and then get out. And so this really motivated me to do that. I also saw my friend Kay. She decided to withdraw from the race, but I was still feeling good. Even though I was a bit of a drowned rat, I was feeling good. So the focus was to get all of the wet gear off, get dry thermals on, and then head out. This took about half an hour though. On top of that, I got some warm liquid coffee into me, and out we went. It was super awesome to have crew, especially at aid station, but I love having hubby crew me full stop, because he knows how to look after me in that sense, and it's very much Team Leslie, which I appreciate. But yeah, I'll notice it was almost 32 minutes at that aid station where I looked at the slits, but it was so needed because I needed to get dry. So complete change of clothes, including shoes. It really was a good example about having the right gear available. A lot of people who withdrew may not have had dry clothes at the right spot, whether it be in drop bags or with crew and so forth. So that's a really key learning there. So we left, when I say we, it's me. I left Perisher and then headed off down to Bullocks Flat. Again, a whole new section of trail where we basically go down. At this point, this is where the mud hits. And the mud hits in a very steep section of brand new trail. And so we have rivers of mud flowing down. You're basically ice skating down trails. So you're not running anymore. You're ice skating down this hill. And it was intense. So you are using muscles through your hips, and you're doing lots more adducting and abducting, these in and out movements through the hips. And then you're just sliding around. Really, poles come into their own. It's now dark. We've got head torches on, and we are just pushing down the hill. What was really cool, at this point, we were getting heaps of mile runners coming past. We were looking so strong. And it was really inspiring to see them come. And the other aspect is that because you're up high, you can see like Bullocks Flat down the bottom. So you can see where you're going to go. You see the light shining. So you had this visual marker. And I kind of also knew where the trail was going to come out. I was looking for certain elements of the trail that I recognised. And so, for example, there was a point where I saw a big granite rock, and I knew that was about 1.5 from the checkpoint. So I'm like, woohoo, breaking, even though you break down checkpoint by checkpoint in terms of a big race and a big distance, I was even breaking it down in between into elements of the trail that I knew. So I get to a point, that's that big rock, I know that's not far. And this was super motivating for me. I get into Bullocks Flat aid station, turning around pretty quickly. At this point, I'm like, I've got this. I'm not concerned about time. This is now me versus the conditions. And that was the absolute huge impact there. So the next section of the race takes you along the Thredbo Valley Trail from Bullocks Flat to Thredbo via an aid station of Garago. And this part of the trail is where I grew up in many respects. So this is where we would camp, this is where we would fish. And the trails haven't changed a whole heap since I was a little girl. In the previous couple of years, though, during this race, I struggled on this section mentally, because it's the middle of the night, it's generally late in the race, there's super fatigue. After I was chatting with my coach, he gave me some really wise words of advice. And because I know these trails so well, it should be like a welcoming experience, not this real struggle street. And it's not to say that there's not struggle within you physically, but mentally, like when you're coming home somewhere, there is a lot of load that comes off. And so as I entered this section of trail, I literally said, the trail is welcoming me home. This is where I'm meant to be. And even when I first got there a few days beforehand, when I was just spending a little bit of time on the trails before the race, there was this beautiful double rainbow. There were kangaroos, there were deer, there were emus, and it was a beautiful homecoming. And so I channeled those feelings into the night along this single trail. And based on like race plan, which was already out the window, I was like, okay, this is just this next section. I just need to get to the next aid station. This is the challenge ahead of me. It's not looking too far ahead and not looking at the enormity of the whole 100K. And so into the night I went. I ran as much as I could, walked the rest, and really using this philosophy of run a bit, walk a bit. So when I was heading up to the summit, as I sort of flick back a little bit, they had these poles were a little bit that had marks on them because when it snows, you might lose the trail. So there's these really tall poles with markers so that you can still follow the trail. And what I was doing, even though there was a constant incline, I was running / shuffling pole to the next pole, then walking to the next pole, then shuffling again. And so really breaking it up. On the Thredbo Valley Trail from Bullocks Flat, couldn't necessarily do that. But when it got to a flat bit or a downhill bit, made sure I ran for a chunk of paces. So I would count to a certain number. And that would vary throughout the night because it would just go by feel. But that would mean that I would say to myself, okay, I'm going to run to 10 right now. Or I'm going to run to 20 right now. And that just kept me moving that little bit faster than I would have without that focus. And really that whole trail between Bullocks Flat, the Thredbo, I was able to do faster than I previously had purely because of that strategy, which for me, on reflection, pretty cool. Because it felt like I took so long, it was hard to focus on what I'd actually gotten done positively because mentally there were so many challenges through this race, like fighting the conditions or just surviving the conditions in some respects. I got to Yarrago aid station. Again, this was a non-crew aid station for everyone, not just for me. I grabbed coffee. I tried to eat some food because the thing here, as soon as it started to get muddy, I actually stopped eating and drinking enough because I forgot. And this is danger, right? Because I was so focused on staying upright. It was super hard to get food out and eat. When you're trying to stay upright, you'd have to stop to eat. And then I'd even stopped sipping on my electrolytes. And a big part of that was actually the trail was so busy, it was so wet. There was, if you needed to go to the loo and do a bush wee, which is what happens in trail running, there was nowhere to really do that. And so I was like, oh, I need to stop drinking so I don't have to go to the bathroom. And then that had a whole flow-on effect. And so I'm coming into the aid station, using the bathroom, and then trying to get as much food and drink into me, but then also trying to get out as quickly as possible. And by this point, we're at 60, 70K maybe, and I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, as I say this, because I'm recording this all off the cuff. But ultimately, I'm not drinking enough electrolytes and I'm not eating enough. So this is a bit of a worry, but at this point, I'm not realising it's a bit of a worry. I'm just trying to get in and out of the aid stations. I'm conscious of the fact that I'm not eating and drinking that much, but I'm kind of not concerned about it, even though I'm aware of it. I think this is where fatigue and so forth comes into play. Like you kind of are aware, but then you don't realise. By the time we get to am I at? I'm coming into Thredbo. We come into Friday Flat, then we do a loop around, and there's an aid station at Thredbo Village. So coming into that aid station, it is torrential. The aid station doesn't really have anywhere dry to stop. My awesome hubby's there with a big umbrella and a chair and everything. Again, I'm just trying to get in and out. I do the routine that I just talked about: bathroom, food, drink. I didn't put on wet weather pants at that point, but I did put my jacket back on because I was feeling so hot in wet weather gear. The next stage, we're climbing up. We go further along the river, then we're climbing up to Eagle's Nest. So we're going up to altitude again through a trail called Dead Horse Gap. Now, coming into Thredbo, I was chatting with some fellow runners, and I'm coming in and I'm thinking, I get into Thredbo, but then I have to go all the way up a mountain and all the way back down a mountain to finish. It's about 15k, but there's so much climbing. It's going to be so cold at the top. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I kind of said it aloud to the other runners what everyone was kind of thinking, going, how are we going to get, yes, we're going to get to Thredbo, but how are we going to get up and back down? And I don't think anyone appreciated me asking question, but they kind of all agreed that's their headspace too. Then I realised it's actually not about what I can do to get up the mountain. I had to surrender a little bit to say that I don't have to actually see it happening for it to be able to happen. All I need to be able to see is me being able to make a step, one more step. And I did start to pray. I was not sort of praying to be removed from the situation. What I was asking for was, please show me the strength that I can to complete the journey. That was prayer that I offered. And then I had to surrender, because if it became about what I could do and me trying to force it, I don't think it would have happened. But surrendering to the process and relinquishing a little bit of control and just focusing on that one step, I think that's what made it happen. Okay, so I left the Thredbo Village checkpoint not wanting at all to go and do this next section of the race. But at the same time, I didn't want to not finish. So off I went. I wasn't feeling it. I knew that it was roughly 10.5k to the top of Eagle's Nest. What I didn't kind of realise is that it was kind of 5k along and then 5k up. Rough and tough. And so that 5k along, that was muddy at all because it was right next to the river. And the sound of the Thredbo River after all of this rain was so loud and angry, like I had never heard before at all. It was so noisy. Well, one step at a time. Try not to fall over. And then you get to the point where you see the sign to Dead Horse Gap. Because for 5k, all I'm seeing is these little trail markers. That's like Thredbo River Trail and towards Dead Horse Gap. I'm like, what? I'm not even on Dead Horse Gap yet. there was this patience, impatience. Finally, we get to the turn off. Say we, when I say we, I'm talking about me. I get to the turn off to Dead Horse Gap, up we go. At this point, there's basically a trail that is a waterfall before coming back down. And yes, there are stairs. Stairs aren't that structured. I hadn't actually ever been up Dead Horse Gap before. But because of the water, a lot of the stairs were being washed away, and we've got relatively short legs, and these stairs became quite huge. And so literally it's poles up, step up, trying to put your feet either side of the trail so you're not right in the middle of the slippery bit, and just doing your best. And as you're doing your best, just others are there doing the same thing, and you can see the head torches away. At this point, there's a fellow runner, and saying, like, I'd been planning to finish in the dark, but at this point, reality hits that when we get towards the top of Eagle's Nest, sun will be up, which will mean we'll have daylight to get back down the other side. Part of me was horrified, part of me was relieved, because I'd had a similar conversation the day before with my friends, Kay, about having daylight for the trek back down might be a good thing. As we climb Dead Horse Gap, you start to sort of see these early signs of dawn, and then you hear the birds. And this was beautiful. But this is also pretty much the coldest time of the day. The wind starts to howl. I'm soaked through, and there is a bitterly cold wind coming through. And the higher I climb, the more forceful the wind is and the colder I feel. Last couple of kilometres towards the top at Eagle's Nest, I start to shiver. And I'm moving, but I'm moving so slowly. And I'm just like, I need to get this done. I am so cold. I just want to be gone from here. So just moving again, one step at a time. But the wind, and I recalled a previous time when we caught chairlift to the top and we're going to walk to Kosciuszko summit via the trail up there, which is not the trail, it's part of the race. And we'd gotten off the chairlift because down the bottom of Metro and up at Eagle's Nest can be completely different weather. And I remember this one time we spent on the chairlift, got to the top, started to walk maybe 500 metres, and we're like, no, stuff this, going back down. I didn't have choice. Couldn't say stuff this. It was like, keep going. So the station, a station at Eagle's Nest was a water point. So literally there was just some water, a couple of bits of snacks, but there was nothing hot. And I started to shiver. So I take my pack off, I leave it on a chair, and then I just wanted to dry off my gloves, put on some warm gloves, and then head back down. And so I went into the bathroom where the heaters were on, and so I'm drying my mittens, and I start to shake uncontrollably. I think I've got my mittens dry and I think I'm going to be good. So I get up and go back out, and I'm like, oh heck, I can't. The first aiders up there suggested I come in and warm up before heading back out, so which I did. I couldn't stop shaking. I spent about 20 minutes at Eagle's Nest just warm up. The wonderful first aiders there were amazing. They realised I hadn't been drinking. They realised I hadn't been eating. And part of my cold response was because I hadn't been eating and drinking. So they made sure I got some food and some drink into me from a pack. And they realised I had all of these warm clothes in my pack that I hadn't thought to put on. And so they warmed up some clothes. They helped me get some wet layers off and get more warm layers on. And at this point, it was 3 and a bit K to the finish. It felt so far away. It was just down there, but it was so far away. There were people that were withdrawing at this point. So I said to the first aiders, I need to finish, so I need to get going. I can't stay here much longer. They helped me get my layers on. And I got out and I got going. At this point, people had seen me cross the checkpoint for the Eagle's Nest, and I was getting messages come through on my phone going, you've got this, I hope you're okay. It was amazing. So I messaged hubby to say that I was getting warm before coming down, and then I messaged him to say, hey, I'm on my way to the finish line, and that's what I did. I was kind of expecting the finish line to be like the start the year before, basically down the sea run, except this was down more of a structured nature trail. And so it was technical single track stairs, steep, but at this point there was so much water. Stairs were being washed away, and it was muddy and slippery, and so each step again was like, let's try not to fall down. And so something that should take maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, took double that. It was like if you put a step wrong, you were going to go bum overhead, and you just didn't want that. It was so close to the finish, all you wanted to do was get there. So I'm getting there, and it's like you see the signs. 3K to go, 2K to go, 1K to go, and you can hear the finish line. And Dave, one of my running friends, is there at MC calling people over the finish line. I know that hubby's there, and you can see it. And I just start to run. And when I say run, I'm doing a running gait, but I've got no idea that I don't think it's very fast. But I can see it, and I'm going. And so there's a point when you enter this really long funnel, and they know it's you coming, and then you can hear over the loudspeaker, this is Leslie coming, and cheering you on, going, and you can hear people ring cowbells and saying, go Leslie, and you just keep going. And I was encouraged to jump in puddles, and I did. And it's like that finish line gets crossed. All I could think of is like, oh my gosh, it's done. And I was so relieved it was done. I went in with a race plan of trying to do 100K BP. And my training probably would have allowed it. The conditions had a different idea. And so it was about getting to that finish line. And so it took me 25 and a half hours rough and tough. I got it done. Now, out of the 950 odd that started, it was 580 something that finished. I was one of, I was towards the back of the pack. Ooh, I claimed that. But I got it done. And it really felt like a victory. as I sort of said at Wilkes Flat, this is no longer about clock. It was about me versus the conditions, and about not letting the conditions stop me finishing. I think that mindset switch in my head helped me finish because it put that focus and it changed what success on the day was going to be. And I think that's really important in life. We can have all the best plans, we can have all the most amazing goals. But if we can't reframe, if we can't reset, we're always going to think we're failing, because goals and plans work in a certain context. When the context changes, we need to reframe what success looks like. Anyway, so that was my 2024 Ultra Trail Kosciuszko 100k journey. It was 107. Strava says 111, but it really wasn't, because I do think there was like a halo with the watch at certain points and I was inside checkpoints. It got done. Some successes were that I kept going. At no point did we ever think of failure. We just reframed. My team Leslie was killing her himself. On retrospect, I had 2 to 3 segments that I absolutely nailed despite the conditions. So that's a win. What are some key learnings? Fueling, hydration. These can always let us down. Yeah? Either too much, too little, or whatever. But what I learned was that because of the challenging conditions, I didn't have a plan B of how to fuel adequately. And I didn't have a plan B for the hydration. And so going forward, there are things I'm going to need to address, especially because I've signed up for the UTMB in May 2025. So these are a couple of challenges I'm going to have to sort out for them. But the cool thing is I know why things happened and what happened, and now it's time to put some plans in place beforehand. But I'm not going to move on super quickly to the next challenge. I'm going to sit and say, hey, I actually achieved something by finishing this crazy race. The Australian Alps will always throw any conditions at you. And I've always spoken about this because I've seen it all in the middle of summer, from snow to hail to rain to scorching heat. And it can be anything, and it can flip on a dime. And that's what happened during this race. It is quintessentially the Australian Alps. So when anything can happen, you need to be prepared for anything. And I'm going to just keep moving forward in that direction. Take care, legends.